Cuphead speedruns are kinda tough. Okay, yes, it's an endless barrage of bosses, there's a lot of difficult tags, and bosses are very random and force us to adapt to what they throw at us, which creates a lot of complexities. I've covered some of this run in previous videos already, and I'm not going to repeat myself too much. But did you know that even the scoreboard you get after each level showing your performance is pretty difficult? Alright, this probably sounds pretty crazy, but I swear I am 100% serious, and this screen can literally make or break a run by swinging the time by about as much as an entire boss fight can. This is going to need some explaining. So in this video, we're going to go over Cuphead's scoreboard, the surprising amount of ways we actually optimize this unassuming part of the game, and why they actually have a bit of an infamy among speedrunners. Alright, so what's so difficult about the scoreboard? To understand this, we have to briefly talk about what's even in it. This is basically a results screen. Here, we will be shown how we fared in the level. First, how much time we took to beat it. This is fairly straightforward. Next is the HP bonus. This usually corresponds to how much health we had left at the end of a level, though as we'll talk more about later, this isn't actually always the case. Then we get how many parries we've gotten from the level, up to 3. These are how many pink objects we've parried in the level, which are things that usually give us extra super meter, which we'll talk more about in just a bit. Not every pink object actually gives us super meter, however, and generally speaking, if it doesn't, then it also won't count as a parry for the results screen. Our next action depends on what level was just completed. If it was a boss fight, this is going to read super meter, which corresponds to how many EX moves were used during the level, up to 6. And for those unaware, EX moves are a special move that can be used by consuming one card on our super meter, which is a sort of mana meter that can be filled up by either shooting an enemy, or like we mentioned earlier, by parrying most pink objects. If instead it was a running gun stage, then this section will read gold coins, which simply corresponds to how many coins have been collected in that stage. Finally, the last section is the skill level. This will display a different amount of stars depending on the difficulty the level was just played on. We will get 1 star for simple mode, 2 stars for regular mode, and 3 stars for expert mode. After all of these sections, we get a grade based on all these values, and then the scoreboard fades out. So, what's so hard about all this? Well, for each of these sections, you can press a button to lock them in early. This on its own would not be particularly remarkable if it wasn't for how this feature was programmed. The time section is the most straightforward one. Once it starts counting up, we can press a button at any time to lock it in. Sweet. But for all the other numerical sections, those being HP bonus, parry, super meter, and gold coins, this doesn't always work. Sometimes we'll press that button and nothing will happen. And the reason why is that, seemingly, this game will only check for a button periodically. You'll notice that when the game animates this number, it will start counting from 1 and then continue adding a unit until it hits the number corresponding to whatever it needs to count. So for example, if we collected 4 coins throughout the level, the animation will count for 1, to 2, to 3, and then finally to 4. When a new number appears, it will display for 3 frames until getting replaced by the next number in the sequence. During these 3 frames, pressing a button during its first 2 frames will in fact work, but it will not work on the 3rd frame. So this explains the slight unresponsiveness. We'll touch on the ways we can work around this later, but first, we have to talk about the skill level stars, because these are somehow even worse. You may not even know that these can be locked in early, but they can. Its effects differ depending on the game's version. On the original version 1.0, this results in the stars going missing, while on version 1.1 and above, this will result in all stars appearing at once, in both cases significantly speeding up the animation. This can actually be done on any star, so if you don't lock them in when the first star starts to appear, you can also do it on the second or third stars if present. It may not look like doing it on the last star does much, but it does actually cause the grade to appear a bit sooner, so it's still a time save. This is called a star skip, and the amount of time we save by performing one has a slight bit of variation depending on the game version and which star in the sequence we get this on, but to simplify a little bit, it's roughly half a second per star we skip. The catch? A star skip is literally frame perfect, meaning we have 1 frame and 1 frame only to press our button and get this early lock-in effect for each star. And because a typical 80% run of Cuphead will contain 19 meaningful scoreboards, on paper this creates a 19-second time variance coming from star skips, along with the other scoreboard sections adding a few more seconds of total variance too. Though the actual variance we can expect throughout the run is a little bit different, and we'll come back to this later. In any case, scoreboards, funnily enough, end up becoming a pretty important part of the run for those at the top of the leaderboards trying to improve their personal bests by just a few seconds. So how can we approach this mess? We basically have 2 approaches available. Approach number 1. Just smash! This is perhaps the most intuitive approach. We do have to note, however, we can pretty much only use 1 button for most of these sections. Which button we have to use is actually a fairly complicated question, because of course nothing is actually straightforward in the scoreboard. On version 1.0 of the game, this is always the confirm button. On version 1.1 and above, this is whatever we have bound as our jump button for all the numerical sections, which by default is confirmed, but not if we've changed it, and then it's back to the confirm button for the skill level stars. You may know that there's two confirm buttons on a controller for this game, those being the start and the bottom face button. However, mashing both is actually detrimental, because if we're still holding one of the two buttons while pressing the second button, then that second button won't get recognized even if we later release the first one, so we're better off mashing a single button. Anyway, if we've rebound our jump button, then on versions 1.1 and above, this is pretty awkward because we have to change which button we're mashing depending on the part of the scoreboard we're on. But assuming we haven't, then this is pretty straightforward. Just mash. Of course though, the speed at which we mash will affect our average times on scoreboards and our success rate with star skips. Since Cuphead runs at 60 frames per second, a mashing speed of 10 presses per second will give us a success rate of about 1 in 6. With the right healthy techniques and enough practice, it is possible to consistently hit about 20 presses per second or more and save several seconds throughout the course of a run compared to a slow mash. But if you hate mashing, you can always choose the second approach. Approach number 2, timing. A more deliberate approach where we just try to press the buttons we need at the right time. However, this presents a bunch of challenges. First, the staggered frame window that most of the numerical sections present means that we are more likely to straight up miss locking them in entirely, because not only do we miss them if we time our button too early, but we also miss them if we time it 2 frames too late and fall right onto the frame where the game will refuse our button press. Secondly, we don't exactly have a great visual cue. Anytime we want to time a precise button press in a speedrun, it helps a ton to have a good visual cue to do so. For example, in a side-scroller, we might want to jump when our character reaches a certain line on the floor, or perform an attack when an enemy touches a certain part of the screen. But on this results screen, well, what do we even have? It's mostly based on vibes. We can look at when the previous section we're locking in has reached its maximum number, then wait some arbitrary amount in our heads, and then perform our button press. It works, but this is pretty hard, and it's even harder for star skips, which are once again frame perfect. Unfortunately, this is kind of the best timing approach we have, so that's a little rough. There is a slightly better technique, however, and that is to perform timed multiple taps. Instead of pressing our buttons just once, we can press them twice, thrice, or thrice. Are those real words? Anyway, these extra button presses will work as basically backups in case we either time our first press early, or we time it 2 frames late on a numerical section, allowing us to attempt a lock on a future number. This is useful for star skips as well, though in this case it only helps us if our first press was early. Still, if practiced, timing this stuff can provide results that are about as good as a fast mash. I personally do a quadruple tap for most sections on the scoreboard, and then do a simpler double tap for star skips, which gives me an average success rate of about 1 in 3. Although having changed my jump button to a shoulder button, this would actually be very awkward for me to do on controller, so I actually temporarily switched to keyboard for scoreboards, where I haven't ever rebound my jump button. The things you do to save a few seconds. Oh yeah, the grade can also be locked in early by pressing the confirm button, and the fade out of the scoreboard can also be initiated early too. Luckily there isn't any jankiness with these ones at least. Okay, that was a somewhat dense explanation, but that about covers the raw difficulties of the scoreboard. With all of this in mind, it might not surprise you too much to hear that some Cuphead speedrunners have occasionally voiced the idea that it might be healthier for the game to remove scoreboards from timing. A Cuphead run is currently timed in loadless time, meaning the time that it takes from starting to run to beating the last boss, but subtracting loading times to make things fairer for people across different PCs. This could potentially be changed to a different timing method, such as for example just adding up the in-game timer for every level played, or just outro-pausing the timer during scoreboards, or even just star skips. But even ignoring the complexities of changing these standards and retiming runs spanning several years of history currently present on the leaderboards, I personally think removing these scoreboards from the run would actually remove some interesting depth from the game too, because the presence of these scoreboards actually affects how we want to play the levels themselves, and here's why. You see, when a section gets counted up, of course, it will take time. If we immediately lock it in, this takes 48 frames at minimum, or about 0.8 seconds. But if our target number on any given section is 0, for example if we perform no parries throughout the level, then this section will be entirely skipped, saving us that time. So this is pretty significant. However, this isn't always worth doing. Let's look at parries. Taking at least one parry will lose us those 0.8 seconds on the scoreboard, along with 10 frames or 0.16 seconds for each parry performed, because the game will temporarily freeze for effect for that amount of time. In exchange, we usually get more super meter, which we can use for more EX moves during the level. So the question we need to ask ourselves is, do these EX moves save enough time to offset the time losses? This really depends from category to category and from boss to boss. For example, in any percent 1.1 plus, on Cagnic or Nations fight, if we get the seeds attack, one of these seeds is going to be parryable and we could collect an entire extra card if we wanted. But because an extra lob reacts only saves around 0.7 seconds, which is less than the 0.96 seconds we lose from grabbing the first parry, then this isn't worth doing. It's actually even more complex than that, and sometimes the extra super meter that a parry gives us doesn't even save any time. For example, if you watch the test I made for any percent 1.1+, which is basically run achieved with the help of save states and frame advance, you may have noticed that I skipped the last parry on Grim Matchsticks phase 1. And the reason why is because without grabbing this parry, the fight already ends with us barely getting the last card we need for the last EX move. If we were to grab this parry, then this is an extra EX move we can use to deal damage early, but crucially, any damage dealt using an EX move on an enemy doesn't provide us with any super meter, and so this results in us not actually getting that last card at the end of the fight, meaning that at the end of it all, we didn't gain any extra EX moves and we just lost 0.16 seconds from the screen freeze the extra parry gave us. On Cuphead version 1.0, parries are even worse, because they additionally reset the cooldown of all our weapons to their maximum value, meaning that we lose a bit of extra damage too. Sometimes parries are still worth it, especially when we can get several of them in the same level, but it really just depends from case to case. As for the other result screen sections, getting 0 on super meter would require us to never use EX moves during a boss fight, which is kind of a ridiculous proposition as these save way too much time to be worth the 0.8 seconds. Although, fun fact, an old world record by Multi-Luigi 100 did once do this on Ribby and Croaks due to EX moves being less effective with the knowledge we had back then and due to the cycle-based nature of this fight. Getting 0 on gold coins is usually worth it in all flags categories, which require us to beat all running on stages alongside all bosses. However, they can sometimes be tricky to avoid, and of course, if we want to actually collect these coins to buy something important from the shop, then we will want to do so. Finally, HP bonus. Getting 0 on this wouldn't seem possible, as we would just be dead by that point, right? Well, there's a few ways. The primary method involves double KOs. This is a frame-perfect trick, where we die on the same frame as the boss. It's not usually viable for real-time runs, as it's way too risky of a trick for the 0.8 seconds it saves, since dying too soon will just result in death. But it's used throughout most of the tasks, and it does give us a 0 out of 3 HP bonus. There is actually one spot worth mentioning, where this can sometimes happen in real time, however. In DLC runs, there's this trick on Moonshine Mob called the Lunar Eclipse, which involves hoping the Anteater's Snout will spawn in the bottom left of the screen, and using 2 lob reacts to deal a ton of damage on it as soon as it spawns, immediately ending the fight and skipping the snail phase that would come after it. If we are hugging the left side of the screen when we do this, then we usually will die on the same frame it takes damage from the lob reacts and ultimately get a double KO. There is another way to get this 0 HP bonus however, though this is limited to the King Dice fight. In this level, we need to roll a die to land on different parts of the board and fight some mini-bosses. On some of these spaces, we will get a bonus heart, increasing our current HP by 1. We can take advantage of this to get our 0 HP bonus. On versions 1.1 and above, if we take enough hits to go down to 2 HP for example, then get a bonus heart and take 2 more hits, the game will think we have just taken 3 HP of damage and will give us our 0 HP bonus. This does not work if we first take the bonus heart to go up to 4 HP and then go down to 1 HP. We first need to go down below 3 HP for the game to register that as points of damage that we took, then get the bonus heart and take the extra damage we need to bring the scoreboard's value down to 0. This means that the ideal luck has us get a heart on either the second or third mini-boss that we fight on the board, so that we can go down below 3 HP on the first mini-boss, then get the heart and take the rest of the damage that we need. On Cuphead version 1.0, it all works much differently and more simply, as the HP bonus simply corresponds to 3 minus however much damage we took, regardless of any of these HP shenanigans, meaning that for example, we can just get a heart on the first King Dice mini-boss we encounter, take 3 hits, and that'll be good enough for the 0 HP bonus. That about covers it. I think it should be pretty evident now why the scoreboard's existence adds quite a lot of complexity to the run. If it didn't exist, we would just get almost any parry we could find, we wouldn't care about any unnecessary coins we collect in running guns, and we would have much simpler damage boost routing in King Dice's fight, for example. I think it's a bit of a shame that there exist all the various input difficulties, and especially the influence on time that star skips provide. But on that note, the impact of star skips is actually a little bit less than you might think. Remember when I said earlier that there are 19 meaningful scoreboards during an any percent run, and so on paper they create about 19 seconds of variance? Well, in practice the story is a little bit different. Look at this graph. Every time I do it makes me this shows the distribution of total star skips across 62 recent completed any percent runs of mine, which I've been keeping track of thanks to a live split plugin. Each scoreboard on regular mode contains 2 stars, and since there's 19 scoreboards, our total star skips range from 0 to 38. But as you can see, there are absolutely no runs placed at the extremes of this graph. Instead, they concentrate towards the middle, creating what's known as a normal distribution or a bell curve. In other words, once we have star skips down, missing close to every single star skip or hitting close to every single star skip is not really something we will realistically encounter. Instead, we will be much more likely to get a star skip amount closer to an average, around 19 in my case. What this means is that in practice, since each star skip saves around half a second, the variance we can expect to see is between 5 to 10 seconds throughout an any % run. This is still pretty significant, but it's more along the lines of how a single boss to the likes of Cat and Bronybeard might affect a run, and less so a time-defining aspect of the run. The way we play each boss and our skills at handling their different patterns matter a lot more. So overall, I think the scoreboard is an interesting part of the run. I like the extra depth it adds to the run, and if anything, I think it's kind of funny that in a run filled with difficult boss fights, even the scoreboard doesn't make things easy for a speedrunner. You could certainly say that's even more character to this run. So yeah, thanks for watching. If you'd like to see more videos like this, feel free to subscribe to the channel as well as to my second channel where I post all my speedruns. Take care!